Hello, I'm Steve. A little about myself. I'm a retired law enforcement officer with 20 years of service. I began my career in the jail, worked the road, and became an investigator. During my career, my training consisted of everything from SWAT to becoming a state certified crime scene technician. I've investigated crimes from thefts to homicides. After retiring and becoming aware of true crime and web sleuths, I started my channel for web sleuths to better understand the perspectives of law enforcement. Not only do we cover true crime, I go out into the field and assist families who have lost loved ones to homicide and their cases are considered cold. Join me as we look and bring attention to these critical cases. Hello, everyone. Glad you're able to join us tonight. Mrs. Steve's getting everything organized here. And
I mean, are you going to talk or do you want your pictures?
Right now, I'm just going to do an introduction of the. But I'm glad everyone can join us tonight, and we're going to be looking at the Kohberger case and some of the search warrants and where law enforcement and how they were able to come about some of the information and where they're going to be going with the investigation, because you can learn a lot about where the prosecution is heading by the search warrants and the evidence gathered. But with that being said, before we get into it, if you're new to this channel, we welcome you. And as you're in chat, if you would just be respectful of families, respectful of the mods and of each other. After we have the slideshow presentation, I'll be answering any questions you have, and absolutely appreciate y'all for being here tonight. And also we have Derek Farmer, a friend of mine that I enjoy talking to, is now a YouTube member. I appreciate you being there and for your support. It means a lot to us in this channel and allows us to go out there and work these cold cases. So thank you. But of course, like I said, the case that we're looking at tonight is of the homicides of Madison, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana that happened in Moscow, Idaho, back in November of last year. And if you have any information on this case, absolutely notify law enforcement of anything that you have or you've discovered or you've heard, tip it in. Although they have Kohberger currently in jail and housed, that still doesn't mean that the investigation isn't proceeding forward. And if you have information, make sure the proper authorities have that information. And also, even for the defense of Kohberger, because we want justice to be found. And we have to absolutely have all information that is available to be presented to the authorities. All right. This is another tip line of how you can get in touch with the proper authorities if you do have any information. And now we're going to look at some of the, in the past few days, I've received some additional paperwork, and there's been search warrants from the Pennsylvania side of it that have been released. Now, this receipt here is when Kohberger had left Washington State University, and the police department executed a warrant at his address in their jurisdiction. And we did a previous show on it, and it's in archived. If you want to go look at that show, you can. And they collected limited information from that. They were looking for hair fiber. They did recover one digital element as far as the fire stick, and then I think they have a computer tire that they also took, which is interesting because they'll do the forensics on everything that is digital that could hold any type of digital data, and see possibly if there is some data that's linked to the homicides. And when you look at the returns, and that's what these, when they have items listed out in regarding a search warrant, that prior to them being able to search, the investigating officers, they go and they present a affidavit to obtain the search warrant. And they may list a lot of things in that search warrant that they're looking for. Doesn't mean that they're going to be able to find those items, but they try to make it as broad as possible, and so that when they come across an item, they can collect it and secure it, and so that it can be sent to the lab and be processed and analyzed by the experts. And the returns tells you more of exactly what they found and what they will be able to send to a lab to be analyzed for, like I said, from fiber hair to digital data. And so as they process that information, and you have that lab work out there, and certain information may be developed from that, which will progress that the case may go from just a typical sentencing of what the offender may face. Was it premeditated? How much planning? Was there any type of cyber stalking or anything that occurred? And when we get into the court system, that you'll see that these attorneys will start asking for additional help and assistance. And Ann Taylor was the name jumped over there under Brian Kohberger, but Ann Taylor has made that request that she's going to need help on this case, because while the return from the Washington State University Police Department search was relatively small, that's not going to be the case of what was recovered from Pennsylvania. And it's going to be extremely critical of the information and the things seized at the time of Brian Kohberger's arrest in Pennsylvania. And it's not just items that belong to Brian Kohberger that were seized. And as we look into that paperwork, you're going to see that a lot of his father's items were taken, and computers and things that were signed for by him, that he received the receipt indicating that was something that was related to him. And so when you start getting into another state and all that other data and possibility of premeditation and all the type of cyber crimes that could be committed, it's going to possibly lead to, when it gets to the penalty phase of, and does it meet the criteria of the certain types of sentencing, of the ultimate sentence, that it takes more than just one attorney. It takes two, usually by state statutes, to represent a client to meet all the constitutional requirements in case that ultimate sentence is given by the court. And so Ann Taylor is anticipating that occurring, and she's seen the returns, and she probably knows that this is going to take more than her, and we need that additional counsel, and she'll get it for the fact that although I don't believe it's been declared yet, it is on the table. And then when you go to Pennsylvania and you look up the search warrant that was executed by the Pennsylvania State Police, it's multiple pages, 30-something pages, and they also included part as Exhibit A of the Washington State University search warrant. And it's redundant of a lot of things that they said. But this part of it by the trooper Brian Knoll of the Pennsylvania State Police, he speaks of being requested to assist the investigation and place the resident under surveillance. And when they became involved in it on December the 28th, and that they were notified of certain movements prior to that date. And then while they were doing surveillance, they observed the suspect, Brian Kohberger, residing or had been at that residence, and so that they could present to the court. And due to the violence of the crime, they requested that they could go in there at any time, and even after, obviously or evidently in the state of Pennsylvania, they're limited about certain times of night that they can execute certain search warrants, and statutes require, no knocks and things here in the state of Georgia. And I'm sure Pennsylvania has something parallel to that if you're going to be doing certain things during certain times in a certain way to maintain the safety of the officers and the public at large, that you have to execute in times that people are not in, won't be placed in unnecessary danger, including officers. And we know that the time that they served this in the morning hours, that's when they struck. And of course, they were able to go in there without incident and arrest Brian Kohberger. And of course, this is just the part of the search warrant when they going in there and doing the probable cause affidavit, the heading of it, stamped, sealed, signed off by the judge. Then we get into the receipt for property. And I went through this receipt of property, and there's 5 different receipts. You have receipts 1 through 4, which all regard Michael Kohberger, the father and the who's at that residence. And they addressed another part of some of the items seized from Brian Kohberger. And it's the 5th item that we'll be looking at. But the first 4 items, I went in there and made special notes of certain things so that you can see where the direction of the investigation is going and what they're looking for. And we have to see that, of course, they seized knives, they seized some books, and, they mentioned things about certain pages being underlined. And then they mentioned about seizing AT&T bills. And there's a lot of electronic devices that were seized. I think there's like 7 to 9, that they Acer, cell phones, Asus, solid state drives, black boxes as you go through here. And which tells you that much like for those of us that are familiar with the homicides in Delphi, law enforcement did when they did the forensics and they looked at the digital footprints of suspects and were developing leads in the early days, that they look at that online presence and what possibly could that be connected to a homicide. And just like we saw with Anthony Schatz and Kegan Kline, that Kegan Kline, after going to another state, he started looking up certain things that were very suspicious. And law enforcement will be doing the exact same thing with Kohberger. From the time that the crime occurred, they're going to look at any type of communication between Brian Kohberger and his family in Pennsylvania. And they'll also be looking at what was that family doing after they had certain communications, and possibly were those communications done in some other manner, such as maybe a burner phone or something of that nature. But still, if they find items or find certain information or certain searches started occurring from the Kohberger home in Pennsylvania, even prior to Brian arriving, was there a flurry of certain types of searches or information that was looked for, what was going on, because that would be extremely interesting if that family started researching certain keywords, and which law enforcement will look at, and they'll see that was there any type of contact, and was there any type of strange use of the computer that started occurring prior to a suspect being identified, or even the suspicious vehicle, or and that's what law enforcement does. They'll go in there and they'll do all type of forensics searches and trying to find those links, and they'll analyze it and what does it mean. And if they find no links or any type of strange searches or any type of digital footprint that might link them to any type of knowledge of the crime or any fears that Brian was involved, of course, that's one story. But there's always other things that might possibly link and give law enforcement reason to go further and look down different paths. And not just for what occurred from the date of the homicide in November. But were those computers used prior to November and prior to Brian moving to Idaho? They'll go in there and look at those computers that's within that home, those hard drives, and I mean, they're all kind of stuff that they took there. You know, there's a Tangent computer, Lenovo, HP. There's motherboards, Samsungs, Acer, and so there's a lot of different devices and computers that's within that home in Pennsylvania that may have been used in a certain type of cyber activity prior to Brian going to Idaho. And if they find that, of course, we'll see that in court, and it will absolutely be something that is huge as far as evidence, especially if anything associated with the residents at 1122. And if it's involving any of the victims, their names, their photographs, um, Facebook activities, social media presence, and they'll be looking at all that items and see if he actually was aware of any of the victims prior to even going to Idaho, or if he afterwards had notified the family of certain data. But I found it interesting, like I said, as far as the electronic devices that were seized. And then there was also some swabs that were taken from the father, from Michael, which I found interesting. There was at least 4 swabs, and there were several knives that were collected from the residents, and I found that interesting. There was one knife that's very similar to a K-bar, and it was a Taylor cutlery with leather sheath. That's very similar to the K-bar style of knife that was the sheath that was recovered from the homicide scene. But the swabs from the father, of course, they're going to have to make sure that there was a link that they had collected from the garbage showing that the parental DNA profile of a possible offender. And then they collect more DNA from the father during the search warrant. And then they took some boots. They got 2 pair of dark boots and 1 pair of brown boots that were taken from the residents and credited to Michael. Doesn't mean all these items belong to Michael Kohberger, but in this part of the search warrant and the return, they listed it as items associated with Michael. And then, and like I said, you got page 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4. And you've got a total, I think, of 63 items that are associated with Michael. And then we go in that we have another receipt that's 1 of 1. And the name that it's associated with is totally Brian C. Kohberger. And they list certain items on it, from the flashlight to the medical style gloves, and several things, and including a buccal swab. And the buccal swab, of course, is a deep cheek swab, so that that's where there's a large amount of DNA that is used to develop those profile. And of course, they've got some of the clothing items of dark clothing that they seized. And then you can see Brian Kohberger's printed name and signature, which I have bad writing abilities. My handwriting absolutely is terrible. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit better than Brian's. Don't know what that means, but his signature is absolutely a little bit disorganized, to say the least, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And make of that what you will. I have no idea what it means, other than that he has poor handwriting. All right. The Pennsylvania search warrant and they just readdressed in one of the articles I read about certain things that they took that they found extremely interesting, especially even with the flashlight, which everyone owns flashlights, and you see a pair of white size 13 Nikes, which indicates Kohberger has rather large feet. And if that's a van, are they able to identify that the individual that was within the residence that was seen by the surviving witness were their shoes of that size, and were they able to determine the size? And so we'll be able to look at that. And actually, I've got the chemicals that I am currently working on a control test, identifying how far after you step in some type of passive blood that or pool of blood, how far you can track that. That as you track the stain becomes lighter and lighter until it's almost you can't see it, and it becomes a latent print. And you have to use certain chemicals to enhance it so it can become back patent so that you can actually see it. And so I'm going to be doing that test for this weekend. And also, I think Chris and I had discussed possibly talking about it Monday also. Chris with Mob Crew. If y'all don't know about Chris and Mob Crew, absolutely check him out, guys. Although I'm sure most here have absolutely admire him as much as I do. And then the officers in the articles talk about that when they found and they executed that search warrant in those early morning hours, that he was dressed in shorts and a shirt and doing something extremely odd, wearing latex medical type gloves and taking personal trash and putting it into separate Ziploc bags. And I can understand that, some people do clean houses wearing gloves. I understand that. And, but I do still find it a little bit odd at 3 or 4 o'clock that it's your personal trash and you're wearing gloves. I can see where this might be a mixture of different people's trash, but when it's your personal trash and you're putting it in different types of separate Ziploc baggies, that's to me is just odd and is extremely interesting. And so we'll be, if anybody has any questions about that or has any answers about that, absolutely let me know, because I do find that interesting. All right. Well, that's pretty much as far as the slideshow, covering all the items. And what conclusions can we draw from this? And it's basically that law enforcement, if they can find that there were some communications and there were some odd searches or any type of incriminating searches by either the family or by Brian Kohberger prior to the homicides, or even after the homicide investigation started and during the homicide, and possibly even locations, state parks, maps of how you can get to certain areas within the state of Idaho, trip times. Like a lot of times you'll go out there and you'll map out certain things if you're going to go on a trip. You'll find things that interest you, and law enforcement will take special interest in all of that. The behavioral science units, they'll look at it, they'll create profiles and see what possible avenues that he may have taken to get rid of certain types of evidence. And, if he searched for certain rivers, crossings, or lakes, dams, and they'll use all that data and all that information to hopefully narrow down the possibilities of where he may have possibly got rid of some evidence. And so we'll see where it goes. We don't have the court case hasn't proceeded to the point that they're having to declare certain things as far as discovery. And after the defense gets their additional counsel and they start bringing a lot of the discovery in, we'll see which way this court case is going to be going and how they may proceed.
Okay. So we are going to start with
All right.
Walkie Talkie, I think.
I love that name.
That is awesome.
I got several right there.
Yeah.
Hi, Steve, this is Steve. I became a member when you weren't live. First time I've been able to catch one. Love the work y'all do. Thank you. We appreciate your support, and without your support, we couldn't do what we do on the cold cases. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
All right. And Dandy says, speaking of Delphi, KK is a state witness in RA case.
I saw that today in an article, and absolutely, that is something that we will be looking at and addressing in the near future.
Okay. And DZ question, if they take Dad's property, like his computer, how long before he gets it back, assuming it isn't evidence?
That's a good question. I don't know. They may keep it all the way up to and past court date, because just because the prosecution is through with it, they have to handle that evidence and collect that evidence in a certain process. But then the defense also has to have the ability to look at it in that raw form also. And so that their experts can look at it and see if they draw the same conclusions, which normally they don't. They look at it that, no, this means this, and because experts do that. You always have your defensive experts and your prosecution, and rarely do they agree. Sometimes, but pretty rare. So it'll be a while before he gets it back.
Okay. And this will do nicely. Mrs. Steve, how's your hand doing? I am still wearing this thing until Tuesday.
That's right.
Tuesday at 3 o'clock. I will be free of this. So thank you very much for asking.
Yeah, appreciate that.
And Dave, I think BK's mental state may come into play at trial, in my opinion. And that's my opinion as well.
I believe it may be addressed, but I think they have certain parts of the trial that they can't, like, insanity is not part of the process within that state.
And DZ, is Brian OCD?
I don't know. He is. I'm sure that there's. I guess I need to get with Dr. Susan and let her look at that and see if, because she may be able to understand more from certain characteristics of handwriting and things of what that means.
And walkie-talkie again. Has Dad got some splaining to do? I missed the beginning.
They spent, well, like I said, they took 60-something items from the home that they, in the search warrant that he signed as receiving the receipts for. Doesn't mean that all these items were his, but they may have been found in common places within the home, or that, okay, they're taken from the home and Brian may not claim them, and or they may be stored in a separate room that is not clear ownership, or they just took them to be on the safe side, and so they're just covering their bases. It appears so at this point. But if they do find certain evidence that is incriminating one way or the other, what will the testimony be, and how will the prosecution? It'll set up a certain questions that may come forth in trial, like if certain searches were conducted on a computer, just like we saw in the Casey Anthony case, that they're on that computer, that the mother of Casey was saying that certain searches were done for certain reasons. And of course, prosecution and defense never agreed on that.
Okay. And Kathy, and I'm guessing Ellie has that trash he was so meticulously trying to get rid of.
Yeah, and that, yes, and they talked about that. They observed him during that time cleaning his vehicle, and that vehicle, I hadn't heard anything. I'm waiting on that vehicle. I've got to do some research on that, because the vehicle that in ownership that was seen through that camera canvassing from the night of the homicides, and the time it spent there, and the time that it left, and what tracking they could do with not only just with the phones, but with additional cameras in the area. that vehicle is going to be huge. Um, be- and I absolutely believe that no matter how well he cleaned that vehicle, Brian, that there should be some type of contamination in it from the crime scene. Just like I believe that Brian left some of his DNA, and we know he left some of his DNA at the crime scene because we have it on the knife sheath. Um, was there additional DNA that we just are not aware of now that was left at the crime scene? And 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 more importantly, that if we find any evidence from the crime scene of any of the victims that their DNA, the hairs, fibers, any type of contamination from any type of blood that is found in his vehicle uh, is absolutely huge and will go a long way towards the conviction of Brian if they can locate it. Um, Even if they don't find the weapons or the clothing or anything else, if they find they the, the DNA and the any type of contamination from the crime scene in his vehicle would stand alone above any other type of evidence out there.
Alrighty. And Josh the Posh, KK is a witness? Question mark. Doesn't that mean that there is a connection?
They're talking about with Kagan Klein's charges. It's not. Um, I'm not totally familiar with it, but I took it that he was going to be that the father is going to be a witness on the Kagan Klein case, not so much the Delphi case, but on the Kagan Klein case. I may be mistaken on that. I just received an email on it that um, Tony was going to be called as a witness regarding Kagan, and so I took it that on the CSAM stuff is what uh, uh, that was addressing to, not so much that it was a direct link to the Delphi homicides.
Okay. All right. And Dave, how do we have the witness list from RA's trial?
I don't think it's from RA's trial. I think it's from, I may be mistaken, but I thought it was from Keegan Klein's trial. I'm not real clear on that. I'll have to go look and check on that, but I think it's from Keegan Klein trial.
Okay. And Eileen, what do you think of report the state destroyed gun due to damage in rust case?
I hadn't heard that, hadn't seen that yet, but I'll look that up. Thank you.
You got homework tonight.
I've got so much homework. Everybody giving me homework.
In Indy, Mr. Steve, can he be mentally ill? He worked hard at covering his tracks, so he knew he was doing wrong, right?
You know, there's a lot of that different types of, and I'm not any way, shape, form, or fashion able to classify or diagnose anyone anything. I do have people that are in that profession, but of course, even they aren't able to just look at reports and articles and someone just sitting in a room or during a traffic stop and be able to diagnose them with anything. And you'll often hear that disclaimer. And we have video of a traffic stop, where of Brian Kohberger and his interactions with law enforcement, and exactly what went on with that. And did he seem, was he in control of his facilities? He's operating a vehicle. He's able to drive from and obey most of the traffic laws. He did violate something to get stopped, but all in all, he's able to interact in society and not have law enforcement constantly called on him about his behavior. So his mental capacity and insanity, I've dealt with a lot of crazy, insane people in my career, and when they're at that level and of being incoherent and incompetent, they gather a lot of attention and they gather a lot of calls because they frighten people and people call on them constantly. and that doesn't appear to be the case regarding Kohberger. So as far as the insanity stuff of him doing a lot of crazy things, committing this crime, of course, is absolutely off the charts. That is not something any normal person would do that has the capacity to think and operate in society. But that's what evil is. Evil does some absolutely horrible crimes and destroys lives. And I believe that is what we've seen in this case also.
And Chris just showed up.
Hey, Chris, glad you're here.
And we've got Snail.
Hey, Snail became a YouTuber. Appreciate it, Snail. We appreciate all the support. Like I said, it helps us do a lot of great things as we're going to move forward with Chris, the mob crew, as we start this new path that we working together and collaborating on working on some of the cold cases. We got one coming up in Texas next month.
All right. And from Boston Christian, if you put something in the trash can, it's no longer yours, is it?
The Supreme Court says that at a certain point, once it reaches that roadside, that yes, it no longer can you claim any type of protection of the Fourth Amendment search and seizure. And law enforcement has used it. It's gone all the way to the Supreme Court on arguing. Now, if that trash can is in your kitchen, they can't go in and get the trash out of it without it. But once you make every effort that and it's clear and defined that you're going to throw away and discard it, and you have no more value or use of an item, and you put it in a trash bag, in a trash can, and you set it out alongside the roadway, then of course you've done everything to prove to the courts that you have no intention of claiming any constitutional rights to that property, and so the courts have upheld that it's no longer yours. It can be seized without a search warrant.
So what about the stuff in the baggie that he had that he was
Well, they had a search warrant that time.
They had okay, they had
Yeah,
a search warrant.
inside the house, sitting at the kitchen, dressed in shorts and shirt with gloves on. The search warrant would cover that part of it.
Okay, and Dave.
Thank you. $4 super sticker, Dave. Appreciate
Super
that.
sticker. Thank you so much. All right, and let me catch up here. Oh, Dave did that because he needed to see the blue light. Well, thank you so much. I like my blue light too, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's better to see this blue light, Dave. I know you drive a lot, and we don't want to see any other blue light in the rearview mirror.
Yeah. All right, and this will do nicely. Do you think that ID found in a glove in a box is the victim's?
I don't know. I really don't know which ID. I hadn't looked at that part of it. I'm sure law enforcement has whatever ID they found, wherever it's from and whoever regarding, especially if it's not associated with a family. Law enforcement will pay a lot of attention not only to that personal ID, but to that area of where it was, if that person is missing or a victim of something or any crimes in that area, they will look for any type of associations or possible links to other crimes.
Okay. And Jennifer Rochelle, you can't diagnose someone online, right, Steve?
That's right. I can't, no, I've met a lot of crazy people, and but that's not a diagnosis. I'm not any way, shape, form, or fashion diagnosing anyone. I don't have the training to do so, and you see all these experts that have that training, and they've dedicated their whole lives to having that ability, and they also claim that you can't, diagnose someone just by seeing something online, and they always qualify that to make sure that everyone understands that that's not a possibility. But I met a lot of crazy people in my life. It's not, like I said, who hasn't?
All right. And Snail.
Thank you. Super sticker, $2. Appreciate it.
There's your blue light, Dave.
That's for Snell too. Oh,
And snail.
yes.
Yeah. Dave likes the blue
He
light.
likes the blue light.
Yeah, he does. All right. And let's see. And thank you, Jennifer Rochelle, for modding tonight. I know you're all by yourself, but I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, she comes and helps me at night too.
Does she?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much. All right. And Kowalski, Steve, quite the contrast between Kohberger and the Delphi suspect, Richard Allen. There isn't much background for Allen, but Kohberger has tons of shady things in his past. Oh, that's not really a question.
Well, no, yes, it is. As far as their social media presence and educational level, there's a contrast in a lot of different ways between these two individuals. But they have both been charged with absolutely horrendous crimes, and of multiple victims, and with similar weapon of choice. So even within, while there is certain contrast, there are some similarities of certain people behave in certain manners, and they commit crimes in certain ways to feed whatever drives them to that eventuality. And what is it? I don't know. I mean, when you're dealing with this type of individuals that are often narcissistic or sociopaths or psychopaths, and they behave in a certain manner, and they have absolutely no regard for anyone else's rights or opinions. It means nothing to them. Um, their opinions are the only thing that matters, and they deserve and are absolutely entitled to make whatever decisions about you that they wish, and they have no regard of how it affects the rest of society. They just don't care.
All right. And that is the last starred question.
Okay.
But
yeah, just go through.
Somebody at the beginning asked about warrant process on how to get a warrant. You want to go through that?
Sure.
Oh, hold on. We got a little sticker.
Cindy, $10. Thank you. Appreciate your support.
You so
Means a lot.
much.
What happens when you have to do a probable cause affidavit for a lot of different types of warrants, or for all the warrants, regardless if it's a search warrant, it's an arrest warrant, evictions. I mean, you have to present something to the court to obtain warrants. And in this case, for the search warrant, they had to go and present probable cause to a judge that has jurisdiction over that area. And so they took this to a judge within the state of Pennsylvania, within this county, within his jurisdiction. And this officer would present not only the affidavit, written affidavit, but he may have supporting verbal further evidence that collaborates and his points, and to fill any holes, because sometimes while you fill out the affidavit and you list all the reasons of the probable cause of why you need that, a judge may look at you and say, well, what about this? And you can either put some type of additional information into the warrant, or most times you're already sworn in, and you can give that verbal testimony of supporting testimony to answer any question that the judge has. And it's not, like I said, it's not that hard to get a search warrant. You just have to go through that probable cause of that. It's reasonable to reach this conclusion of why this individual's involved. And it's the same for the arrest warrant, that you have certain information and you witness certain acts that lead you to believe that a crime was committed. And, you're sworn in, you sign that probable cause affidavit for a search warrant or arrest warrant, and the court sign off on it, and it gives you the power to go and search property, seize property, and the homeowners, the property owners, they have, there's no, there's nothing that they can do to stop it at that moment. Now they can go later to court, and if the court upholds that the search warrant or the arrest warrant was improperly obtained, they can have it squashed, and nothing from that search warrant can be entered into court. And that happens. And same with arrest warrants, that if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's, and you are going in there with good faith, with good information, and doing what is expected of you, then they the courts will just throw it out. And then once it's thrown out, you have that poison tree, and it can absolutely destroy a case.
All right. So a continuation on that question, and this is pigeon backwards. So it could be days or weeks between PCA and warrant.
Well, the probable cause affidavit is presented to the judge at the time that it's signed, but that doesn't mean that the probable cause affidavit is written that day. It can start weeks or months before that certain things are discovered, and it's almost like a timeline of certain things that occur, and you'll see that on a certain date a crime occurred, and then hours or weeks later something else occurred that starts insinuating or is incriminating. It starts telling you a story of why it's probable that this offender committed this crime, and or that there's certain evidence located in a certain property. And so the development of the probable cause affidavit can take days, weeks, even years, especially with what we have with DNA now. But once it exists, and once it's written and it's ready to go to court, that's when it everything is presented. That probable cause affidavit is presented to the judge, and on that day, that decision is made. It's just that within the probable cause, everything doesn't have to happen within a small time period. It can be days, weeks, and years.
Okay. And I think Chris has gifted memberships, maybe?
Excellent.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your support.
Appreciate it. All right. And from Deborah Young, great to see your name pop up. Mr. Steve, a citizen cannot collect, for instance, a beer bottle and turn it over to the police. I never understood that totally.
Well, and that's for the fact that you're going on evidence that it's not what the police collected. The police can collect it, and that's firsthand. But now you're having that, you're having to believe someone else, and is it actually from that person? And that would be the only thing that might cloud the issue. But law enforcement has a job to do, and if they need to go collect a beer bottle, let them go. They'll be able to find, because there is a certain DNA profiles and things that before DNA it was never questionable. And as far as fingerprints and stuff, now when you go, it's not, and also you have to put it in proper context. That beer bottle may be at the scene of a burglary that the homeowner has come home and found, and they may secure it over somewhere and then give it to police. So there's sometimes that certain things that are evidence can be collected by a citizen that had just set it to the side. But there's sometimes that's not appropriate, but there will be times that it could be appropriate to an investigation.
Okay. All right. And Indy.
$5 super sticker. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely awesome.
Let's see here.
And also, everybody's got to thank Chris. I sent him all the stuff for my introduction, and he did a great job on that, and I appreciate that so much. Golden Fire, $5 super sticker. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, and Dave's got two back to back, so I'm going to read the first one and then I'm going to go out and get the second one.
Absolutely.
All right, Dave, what was the quickest warrant and PCA you've seen, Steve? Hold on. Dave, how quick can they get one? I mean,
You know, law enforcement has the ability that if we see a crime committed, we make the arrest and then we instantly just go to a judge. We have a time frame that we have to get to a judge and get that search warrant or arrest warrant um, obtained. Um, and because if you fall outside the limitations of presenting the probable cause for an arrest, they can squash it and throw it out. And law enforcement, we know those timelines, and we always, there's been a lot of times that you arrest someone and you walk into the jail, and while you're booking them, and before you can go to the home, especially at night, there was a lot of times that we would arrest somebody at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's always judges on call, and so you just call them, and you go over to the residence, and you get the probable cause for arrest um, um, signed, and so it's taken care of. Or you come in the next day, go see the judge at the courthouse, and do the same thing. So there is a time frame for it. So you can get search warrants, and even search warrants, same thing. There's judges on calls that if you come into a certain type of crime scene and you're there on one type of call, and it's not uncommon to be there and answering a call, and you see things that may be related to a burglary or even a homicide. There's officers that I know of that's responded to certain types of call and then find that there's a homicide victim on the property. And but just like with what we're looking here with Kohberger, the crime scene was discovered earlier in the day. The investigations by the investigators in entry and seizing and starting processing didn't occur for several hours. And that's for the fact that those investigators were having to go by the book, obtain the information from the first responding officers of what did you see and what has occurred and what do we suspect. And so we have the deaths of 4 individuals that meet the definition of what is a suspicious deaths, and they have probable cause. They establish it. They get those search warrants because there's other people that live in that house. And when you first answer that call, such as with the Idaho 4 and the death investigation, that if it turns out that there was someone within that household that was involved, then of course, if you went in there, wrote the search warrant, and some attorney, they could squash that evidence and you wouldn't be able to use it. And so a lot of times that's how come that there's several hours before the investigators walk in and start processing because they're obtaining those search warrants.
okay. And from Lane C. Wright.
I saw that the Fed boys were involved early in the BK investigation. Do state police have to request their help? If so, what kind of case warrant their help? With this case, it did involve crossing state lines, which is when you have, of course, you asked other agencies across the state lines to assist, which they did. You had the Washington State Police, University Police that helped in the investigation. But the federal agencies are able to also, if you request them, I mean, the FBI has resources that are across the board that are so useful to local agencies and jurisdictions, so that if you do have an offender that you may not have the ability to arrest at some point, and say, such as with Kohberger, that they start traveling state to state, local law enforcement may be able to also just follow them, but they wouldn't have the ability and the resources that the FBI has. And so it's so much easier to hand it off to the FBI, U.S. Marshals, and some of the other federal agencies, Homeland Security, that they all have certain powers and have the resources to ensure that they can maintain constant contact from one place to another across all those state lines.
And Sandy,
Thank you.
super sticker.
Appreciate it. Means a lot to us. Absolutely. We'll be using that in Texas.
Yes, we will. And Dave, could that have happened with RA?
Yes, there could be other things of when he lived in other areas, or possibility, even during the investigations of other crimes that may possibly be linked to other states. It's just so much, plus FBI has the database of violent offenders. And so you can use that resource, and they can link crimes and do the behavioral science analysis, and they just have unlimited resources, absolutely unlimited resources.
Okay, and Davey, Steve, what's your theory on why they waited so long to call 911?
It could be from the fact that they, that the surviving witness, of course, will be asked that, and will get her absolute answer in court. Was she not in her right mind? Was she panicked? Was it something that she didn't put much credit to, that she just didn't think? And who would? I know that it frightened her that she saw someone that she didn't recognize in the residence. And but was it some of that fear? Did she just not give it full thought? I have no idea. And as we spoke with Dr. Susan about it, I never knew that, some people may lock down and go in some type of shock for a little while. And of course, everybody argues and has differing opinions. I have no idea, other than when it was discovered, that's what brought us here, and it will be answered in court.
All right, and
Oh.
Alexander.
Until I figure out how to join membership first time here, enjoying the show. Thanks. You can send me an email, steve@truecrimeweb.com. And if you're on some type of device that's not a laptop or a computer, there's certain processes. So just send us an email. If you're on iPhone or Android,
Yeah, they put
there's a
the
different,
chats out there.
there's a different way to join on some of those devices. But
Right,
thank you.
let's see here. I don't know why iPhone makes it so hard. It's that Safari thing, I think. All right, let's see here. That is it for questions.
Okay.
Let's see here. I'm going backwards.
She's going to go look just in case we missed anything.
All
And
right, let's see here. Waited so long to call 911. Yep.
all right.
Yep. No more questions for you.
Okay. Well, guys, we appreciate everybody coming in tonight.
Wait. I did miss one. Sandy, I apologize.
Okay.
Sandy, heard BK Elantra taken apart to search HVAC owner in Idaho offered LE their equipment but did not use. Curious why not when it's high tech to collect DNA and blood, etc.
I don't, on the HVAC, I know that there are certain filters and there's certain ways that law enforcement gathers evidence. And if it doesn't meet certain criteria and protocols. You may have certain owners and experts in certain fields, and is it a decision? Because I don't know the HVAC owner in this, if it is someone that is involved in forensic lab HVAC, or if it's just a common um, um, company, local company. I don't know what their level of expertise is. I don't know the proper context. But the also with the Elantra being taken apart to search, yes, there's going to be a lot of that vehicle is probably undrivable, and hopefully they took it apart, and everything that you can imagine will be looked at and processed, and hopefully they're able to find some type of evidence from within as far as cross contamination from the crime scene to when he left that residence after committing the act of these homicides, and he contaminated that vehicle in some way that will be discovered. Because, like I said, that's strong evidence if they're able to find that.
All right, and let's go see.
But yeah, it just
That's
like I said, I just don't know what context and what the expertise of whoever the HVAC is. I know that they brought one in, but I don't know for what reasons. But anyway, guys, we want to thank everyone that was here tonight. We got another one.
Golden. Oh, nope.
No, no.
Nope. Golden Fire popped one in. Steve, have you ever considered being a trial expert witness? Your recreations are amazing.
I've been in court as an expert, but that was when I was working. I made certain decisions after I retired of not, but I most certainly would, if anyone asks me, regardless if they're for anything, I would try to help them, just like we do with the cold cases. But generally, you have certain individuals out there that their livelihood is based upon taking their qualifications and creating a business profile and platform, and that's what they do. And some experts are extremely good at it, and I admire them, and I just haven't chose to go that path, and never knew that the skill sets that I was trained to do during my career would ever have an impact. And I never, back then we didn't even know about YouTube, and that's some modern phenomenon that we are now experiencing. But and but I appreciate this opportunity that I can still give back and have an impact. And I look forward to what Chris and I are going to be doing in the coming months and years. And I look forward to having that impact on these cold cases.
Oh, and Jennifer Rochelle just popped in here. Golden Fire gifted membership.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. That means a lot to us. And like I said, we're going to be going to Texas in just a few weeks. I got to contact the owners. I was supposed to go there next week, but there was a conflict as far as getting everything organized. So that's been put off till April, but I'll be letting everyone know about that. And see, our next show will be Saturday at 8. And absolutely join us.
Are you going to try to have a little blood work on Saturday?
Yes, we're going to have, there will be some of my control test and some controls, and might include a little bit of luminol and amido black and the Kohberger footprint and Mrs. Steve's washing machine.
There you go.
Always. All right, guys. Appreciate y'all being here. Y'all stay safe out there, and we'll see y'all Saturday evening. And if you like this video, share it, like it, and we appreciate y'all being here, and thank you.
All right. Y'all are the best. Love you.